I knew something in my life had gone wrong the day my own daughter told me I should stick to soup. No accusation, no shame in her voice, just that calm, managerial tone she used on her waitresses. "Mom," she'd said, opening my fridge without asking, "rich meals aren't good for women your age. A light soup in the evenings will be enough for you." Enough. As if hunger, dignity, and routine could all be measured with one ladle. As if I'd become too old to deserve anything more. I didn't argue. I just nodded, standing there in my small kitchen, pretending I didn't notice she'd taken the roasted chicken I'd been saving for tomorrow. "I'll use it at the restaurant," she added. "It would just go to waste here." At 78, I'd learned that silence can sometimes protect you, though lately I wondered if it had only made me invisible. My joints ache, yes, and my memory sometimes slips, but I'm not a woman who forgets who she once was. I ran a tailoring shop with my late husband for 27 years. I raised a daughter alone after he passed. I kept our home, our savings, our dignity. And now here I was, eating soup while she dined on entrees she photographed for social media. That evening, the broth tasted especially thin. I sat at the table with my spoon halfway to my mouth, staring at the window. You reach an age where reflections disturb you more than wrinkles do. Mine looked tired. Tired in a way that didn't start with age, but with someone gently, persistently pushing you out of your own life. Jenna used to be my girl with scraped knees and pockets full of stolen apricots. Now she was a business owner with manicured fingers, tapping my countertop like she was checking for dust. I put the spoon down and turned on the little radio by the sink. Noise helps soften loneliness, even if it's just someone selling tires or reading the weather. But instead of a forecast, I heard my phone vibrate in my pocket. A number I recognized, the bank. They never called without reason. "Mrs. Ellington," the young man said when I answered, "we've noticed some unusual activity connected to your business license." I blinked at the wall. My business license? My tailoring shop had closed 8 years ago. "Yes," he continued, "documents were filed under your name last week, and several vendor accounts appear to be linked to your signature." My signature. I stared at my right hand. People think old hands shake because of age. They shake because of the things they've carried too long. The banker's voice softened. "If this was done in error," but I already knew it wasn't an error. I knew the only person who still had my old paperwork, the only person who borrowed it just to check something, the only person who knew the exact shape of my name. "My daughter," I whispered before I could stop myself. There was a pause on the line. "Would you like us to freeze the accounts for your safety, Mrs. Ellington?" Safety. A strange, bitter word when danger comes with the scent of your child's perfume. "No," I answered quietly. "Not yet." I hung up and sat very still, the soup cooling beside me. Outside, a dog barked, a car passed, and somewhere a woman laughed. Free, careless laughter. I tried to remember the last time Jenna had laughed like that with me. I couldn't. I stood up slowly and went to the drawer where I kept my old business documents. The folder was exactly where I'd left it, but lighter. Too light. Papers missing, pages disturbed. A faint trace of perfume I didn't use. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, not fast, but heavy. At my age, you don't start imagining things. You start finally seeing what's been happening in front of you. For years, my daughter ate at restaurants while I ate soup. She lived brightly while telling me to live quietly. She built her comfort on the scaffolding of my silence. But something shifted that night as I sat back down, folder in my lap. It wasn't anger. Anger burns too hot for old bones. It was something colder, steadier, a realization settling into the empty spaces where trust had lived. I may be 78, I thought, but I am not done. And I remember very well whom I once helped climb to success, and who still owed me more than gratitude. I closed the folder and turned off the radio. The quiet felt different now, not empty, but waiting. It's a strange thing, remembering the woman I used to be. Not because age steals the details, no. Age steals the softness around them. What's left stands sharp, like glass under sunlight. That night, after the call from the bank, I sat in my armchair and closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw my younger self clearly. Steady hands guiding fabric under the sewing machine, my husband's laughter filling our little shop, customers calling me the woman who can fix anything. Back then, I was needed, respected. I woke every morning with purpose, not with stiffness. Jenna grew up there, among the rolls of cotton and chalk lines on the table. She'd sit on the counter swinging her legs, eating apples George peeled for her. "Mama's the strongest woman in town," he used to say, and Jenna would nod, her eyes wide with admiration. It almost hurts to remember that sincerity. Children rarely doubt the people who raise them. The doubts come later, when life tempts them with easier explanations. When George died, the shop nearly died with him. I kept it open 5 more years out of pride alone. Long nights, sore back, the fear of losing everything we'd worked for. Jenna was in college then, calling home only when she needed money or advice she wouldn't follow. I didn't blame her. Youth is loud. Grief is silent. They rarely hear each other. Eventually, I sold the shop. Not for much, but enough to live modestly. Enough to help Jenna when she decided to become something. She tried many things: photography, handmade candles, an online boutique, even a dog-sitting service that lasted exactly 2 days because she didn't like the smell. And each time she failed, she came back with trembling hands and big ideas, and I, foolish as an old willow bending toward water, helped her stand again. When she opened her first cafe, she cried in my arms. "Mom, this is it. My real start." I paid the deposit on the lease. I covered her first supplier invoices. I bought new uniforms for her staff when she said the old ones didn't match the aesthetic. I even took out a small loan in my name, one I finished paying off just 2 years ago. She promised she would repay me. She promised she'd take care of me when she made it big. Promises. Promises sound different when repeated over decades. They lose shape, like fabric worn thin. But the moment that keeps returning, the one that still stings, happened 5 years ago. She'd invited me to a tasting event at her cafe. I arrived early, wearing the good blouse I kept for holidays. Jenna took one look at me and whispered, "Mom, next time warn me so I can help you pick something more polished." She said it kindly, almost affectionately, like explaining weather to a child. I smiled then, but something cracked inside. It was the first time she looked at me not as her mother, but as an inconvenience. And still, I kept helping. That's the part I struggle to forgive in myself. Not her arrogance, not her entitlement, not even her quiet replacement of affection with dependence. No, what I regret is how easily I accepted it, how naturally my hands reached for my purse each time she sighed, how instinctively I stepped aside, making myself small, thinking it was love. But that phone call from the bank, it tore the curtain down. My business license, my signature, my identity used without a word to me. I sat there remembering all the times she'd asked, "Mom, do you have those old papers? I just need to look at something." Or, "Mom, can I take your folder? It'll save me a trip." I trusted her. Even when she forgot to return things for months, I trusted her. It felt harmless. It felt motherly. Now it felt like betrayal, wearing familiar perfume. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. Across the street, Mrs. Langley was setting dinner for her family. 3 generations squeezing around a single table, loud and chaotic and full. I watched her wipe her hands on her apron, laugh at something her grandson said, touch her daughter's shoulder as she passed. I used to imagine Jenna and I would be like that in my old age. I used to imagine she'd come home tired but smiling, leaning her head on my shoulder the way she did after school. Instead, she came to my house only when she needed supplies from my pantry. Life doesn't betray you loudly. It whispers its warning through small humiliations. I went back to the drawer with my documents and pulled out the remaining papers. Old tax forms, invoices, licenses, contracts. Some pages were indeed missing, specifically the ones tied to my former shop's identification number. Someone knew exactly what to take. Someone who believed I wouldn't notice. My knees ached as I lowered myself into the chair, but inside me something steadier had woken, a kind of cold, clear awareness. The kind I hadn't felt since my shop's busiest season, when I had to take charge and make decisions without hesitation. I reached for my phone. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like an old woman. I felt like a woman who had reached her limit. And Jenna, whether she realized it or not, had pulled the last thread holding my silence together. The next morning began with that stiff, familiar ache in my hips, the kind that reminds you your body now wakes earlier than your mind. I shuffled to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and tried not to think about the missing papers. But thoughts, like old bones, rarely stay where you put them. They wandered back again and again, circling the same questions. How long had Jenna been using my name? And what else had she taken without asking? When I heard the gate click, I didn't expect anyone. Most people my age receive guests only on holidays or emergencies, and lately, the only urgent thing in my family was Jenna's ambition. But then a warm voice called, "Grandma, it's me." Evan, my grandson, 17, long-limbed, gentle, and honest in the way only young people can be before life teaches them to speak indirectly. He came in carrying a notebook and a smile that made my house feel less empty. "You didn't answer my text," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I thought maybe you'd overslept." "At 78? I chuckled. My days of oversleeping ended somewhere in the last century. He laughed, pulled out a chair, and began rummaging in his bag. I watched him, feeling that old warmth rise, the one you get when someone visits you simply because they want to, not because they need money, childcare, or a signature on something they're not willing to explain. "Want tea, sweetheart?" I asked. "Always." I poured for both of us, and we sat there for a moment, the steam curling between us like an old, familiar bridge. He looked at me with those earnest hazel eyes of his. No judgment, no hurry. I wonder sometimes how such a soft heart grew out of such a hardened mother. "How's school?" I asked. He shrugged in that shy way of his. "All right. Coach says I might get a scholarship next year, but—" He hesitated, tapping his spoon. "Mom says not to rely on it. She says we should start eating out less. To save money." I blinked. Save money. Jenna had said the same thing to me yesterday while leaving her espresso cup on my counter. Yet I knew she spent more on one evening at her restaurant than I spent on groceries for a week. Eating out less, I said lightly. Does she cook more then? He shook his head. No, she still eats at the restaurant, almost every night. She said she needs to maintain relationships with investors. He made air quotes, a gesture of teenage skepticism. Actually, she was there yesterday when I came to pick up her keys. 3 plates on the table. Looked pretty fancy. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. 3 plates? Fancy? I pictured Jenna scolding me about soup while ordering lobster for herself. Though I had no proof yet, the pieces began slotting together in a way that made my stomach tighten. Evan kept talking, unaware of the storm inside me. She's been stressed, Grandma. The restaurant's having issues. She says she needs to expand the brand and maybe open a second place. Investors want everything polished. She even said she needs to upgrade her image. He rolled his eyes, which is why she won't let me wear my old hoodie when I visit her at work. Upgrade her image. It echoed in my chest like an insult wrapped in satin. I stirred my tea slowly. Did she say anything else? Not really. He hesitated, then added, She said she's thinking about asking you for help again. Financial help, I mean. I felt the heat leave my hands. Again. Help. As if decades of my sacrifices were nothing more than a warm-up. Evan must have sensed the tension because he looked at me more closely. Did something happen? You look, I don't know, different. Different. Yes. Something had been shifting inside me since last night. A kind of clarity that felt both painful and necessary, like pulling a thorn that had lived too long under the skin. I'm all right, sweetheart, I said quietly. Just a little tired. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Warm, steady, genuine. If Mom's stressing you out, you can tell me. I know how she can be. I smiled at him, a thin but honest smile. You're a good boy, Evan. I learned it from you, he said, and something in my chest tightened. He stayed a while longer, telling me about school, his friend Julian's new puppy, and the girl he liked but refused to name because he thought I'd tease him. I listened, really listened, and for the first time in days, I felt anchored again. Seen, not erased. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me tighter than usual. I'll check on you tomorrow, okay? I nodded. Drive safe, and tell your mother I said hello. He made a face. I will, but she'll probably be at the restaurant again. When the gate closed behind him, the silence rushed back into the house. But now it felt heavier, charged with too many truths. 3 plates at the restaurant. Fancy meals. Money problems masked as sophistication. My license used without my knowledge. I looked at the drawer with my missing papers again. Evan's visit hadn't caused the shift within me. It had confirmed it. My daughter wasn't simply careless. She wasn't simply thoughtless. She had begun to build her world from pieces taken out of mine. And somewhere along the way, she stopped believing I would ever notice. But she was wrong. I noticed now. I told myself I wasn't going to the restaurant that evening. I truly meant it. I had planned to sit quietly, maybe mend the loose button on my cardigan, brew chamomile tea, pretend the world outside my windows wasn't shifting under my feet. But as the sun began to lower, some restless current inside me grew stronger. It wasn't anger. Anger burns too fast. It was something heavier, older, almost weary. A feeling that I had spent too many years letting life happen around me instead of through me. Around 6, I put on my coat. I didn't remember deciding to do it. My body simply stood up and acted as if it knew something my mind wasn't ready to admit. I locked the door, walked down my front steps, and let the cool air settle my nerves. The bus ride downtown was slow, but I didn't mind. Movement felt like purpose, and at my age, purpose is rarer than good sleep. When I reached Jenna's restaurant, the outdoor lights were already glowing. Warm amber strings hung from the awning, soft music drifting from inside. It looked beautiful, I'll admit that. She had taste. She always did. I stood across the street for a moment, watching people walk in with laughter on their lips, dressed in clothes I could never afford. There was a time when I pushed Jenna's stroller past this very block, before any restaurant existed here. Funny how life circles back. Only now the stroller is gone, and I am the one standing alone. I crossed the street carefully, my knees complaining. When I reached the window, I paused. It felt intrusive to look in, but I needed to understand, needed to see with my own eyes what my grandson had described. The dining room was full, candlelight, polished glasses, servers floating like shadows. And there, at a corner table, sat my daughter. Her hair perfectly done, her dress elegant, the kind of thing she always said she couldn't afford unless business picked up. In front of her were 3 plates, one half-finished risotto, one untouched slice of steak, and a dessert she was eating with small, dramatic bites. She laughed, an easy, carefree laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. A man sat with her, someone well-dressed, talking quickly, gesturing with excitement. She leaned in, touching his arm lightly, nodding with that bright, polished confidence she never used on me. I watched her raise a glass of white wine. Expensive, judging by the bottle on the table. My soup from last night flashed in my mind, thin broth and 3 soft vegetables floating like tired swimmers. And her voice, "Mom, a light soup is enough for you. Trust me. Trust me." I stepped closer to the window without meaning to. My reflection merged with the image inside, my tired face overlapping hers. 2 women separated by glass and years of unspoken truths. Then she turned her head. For a moment, our eyes met, though I wasn't sure she truly saw me. Her expression didn't change. She looked right through me, through her own mother, as though I were just another passerby pausing to admire the place she'd built. She smiled politely, the same smile she used on customers, then turned away before I could lift my hand. Just a smile, no recognition, no warmth. My daughter, sitting in a place I helped fund, eating a meal I could never justify for myself, pretending not to know me. I took a breath that felt too shallow. The air tasted metallic. It wasn't humiliation I felt. It was a kind of closing, like a heavy door finally shutting after years of being stuck open. A quiet end to something I had kept alive long past its time. I stepped back from the window. My palm touched the cool glass, leaving a faint print that disappeared almost instantly. At my age, you learn how quickly traces vanish. A server walked past me outside, carrying 2 bags of trash. She glanced at me kindly. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "No, I'm just leaving." I walked toward the bus stop, each step slower, but strangely steady. I didn't look back. There are moments in life when looking back is nothing but salt in old wounds. I had seen what I needed to see. On the ride home, I watched strangers' faces reflected in the dark bus windows. Young people laughing, a tired man rubbing his temples, a mother rocking a fussy baby. Ordinary life. Honest life. Not the staged world Jenna wrapped herself in. At one stop, a couple boarded, elderly, holding hands. The woman adjusted the man's scarf with gentle fingers. He squeezed her hand in thanks. I felt something inside me clench, not from envy, but recognition. Once upon a time, George would fix my coat collar the same way before winter markets. I wondered what he would say if he saw Jenna today. I wondered what he would say if he saw me, sitting quietly, shrinking, letting myself be sidelined. He wouldn't approve of that. When I got home, the house felt different. Not emptier, firmer, as if the walls themselves had straightened. I hung my coat, sat at the kitchen table and folded my hands. No tears, no shaking. Just a quiet certainty settling like dust on an old shelf. My daughter had eaten at restaurants while I ate soup. She had smiled at strangers while ignoring me. She had used my name while treating me like an afterthought. And now I finally understood. She believed I would tolerate it forever. I reached for the folder with my documents again. This time, I wasn't searching. I was preparing. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger. Anger exhausts you, and exhaustion eventually forces rest. No. What kept me awake was clarity. That cold, sharpening clarity that comes only when illusions finally fall away. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settling, the pipes sighing, the wind brushing the shutters. Everything felt familiar, yet inside me something had already shifted and would not shift back. At dawn, I got up, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table with the folder of remaining documents. For years it had been nothing more than a relic of my working life. Old licenses, tax forms, agreements. Now it felt like evidence. And the more I studied it, the more certain I became that Jenna hadn't acted carelessly. She'd acted deliberately. Pages were missing in a pattern, not random gaps, not forgotten sheets. Only documents tied to my identification number from the shop. Documents someone might use to link a new business under my name. And in 2 of the pages still left, the corner edges showed faint marks, as if papers had once been clipped together there. I traced one mark with my thumb. My hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from recognition. Memory is faithful in moments you wish it weren't. A year ago, Jenna had come by in a hurry, saying she needed just a few papers for a meeting with investors. She'd kissed my cheek, swept the entire folder into her bag, and left before I could ask which papers she needed. When she brought the folder back 2 weeks later, she was radiant, almost breathless. "Things are looking up, Mom," she'd said. "You'll be proud of me." I remember feeling warm with hope, as though I'd contributed something. Now that warmth tasted bitter. I closed the folder and rubbed my temples. 78 is too old to be learning that your own child sees you as something to be rearranged, borrowed from, or quietly erased. Around noon, I opened the drawer where I keep old letters and photographs. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't always minimized. I found a picture of me and George outside our shop. Me holding a bolt of fabric. Him with that silly grin he saved only for moments when he felt especially proud of me. Looking at it, I felt a quiet steadiness rise in me. George would never have let anyone, even family, use him as a shadow to hide behind. I wasn't sure yet what I would do, but I knew this. The days of closing my eyes and hoping Jenna would return to the daughter she once was. Those days were over. The phone rang suddenly, startling me. For a moment I hesitated, then answered. "Mom?" Jenna's voice was brisk, too cheerful. "Just checking in. You sounded tired yesterday. Did you eat something light like I told you?" I stared at the wall. I ate what I wanted. A small silence. She wasn't used to that tone from me. "Well," she said lightly. Good. Listen, I might need your help with a few documents again. Investors want updated filings, nothing big. I'll come by tomorrow to grab them. My grip on the phone tightened. Which documents? Oh, you know, she said vaguely. The old ones from your business. You won't understand the details anyway, Mom. Don't worry your head about it. Don't worry your head about it. Once that phrase would have made me shrink a little, step aside. But now it only settled in me like a weight I no longer intended to carry. I don't think I'll be giving you anything, I said quietly. More silence. A different kind. Mom? What's going on? I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood I didn't owe her explanations for wanting my own life back. After the call, I walked to the kitchen window. The light outside was soft, pale, the early afternoon kind that makes even old houses look gentle. I watched 2 sparrows hop along the fence, pecking at crumbs someone had left. Simple creatures, careful, but unafraid. For a moment I envied them their uncomplicated instincts. Then I turned away and sat back at the table. My daughter believed she still controlled the story, believed she could pull documents and money and obedience from me the way she always had. She didn't realize the ground beneath her had already shifted, and I, for the first time in a long time, felt the ground beneath me return. The next morning, I woke with the same feeling I used to have on inventory days at the shop, an odd, focused calm, the kind that settles in when you finally realize avoiding the truth is harder than facing it. The sunlight barely touched the edges of my living room when I dialed the bank. My hands didn't shake this time. Age takes many things, but it also gives a kind of steadiness you don't earn in youth. A young man answered, the same one who'd called about the suspicious filings. Mrs. Ellington? Thank you for returning our call. I have the documents you asked about. I didn't ask yet, I said quietly. He hesitated. Oh, my apologies. The activity on your account indicated a likely follow-up. I inhaled slowly. Tell me exactly what was done under my name. He cleared his throat, and I could hear papers shifting. There were vendor applications filed with your outdated business license. 3 supply accounts were opened, 2 credit lines attempted, 1 approved, 1 pending. All appear to be connected to a restaurant operation. Restaurant, of course. And the signature? I asked. Another pause. It matches the signature on your old tailoring license. I closed my eyes. And you believe the signature to be mine? We can't determine that by phone, ma'am, but it is consistent. Consistent? Such a polite word for stolen. I thanked him, or at least I think I did. When I hung up, the silence in the room felt different. Not hollow, not suffocating. Just honest. Finally honest. Everything I had suspected now stood in front of me, stripped of excuses. Jenna hadn't used my name out of desperation. She used it because she assumed she could. Because she assumed I'd never check. Because for years, I never did. I sat down at the table and folded my hands. They looked thinner than I remembered. My skin had grown soft, creased. But underneath the softness there was still the woman who once handled customers, invoices, arguments, and grief without letting her voice tremble. I reached for my teacup, though I couldn't recall making tea. My mind kept replaying the banker's words, each one landing with a dull, familiar weight. A weight I had carried so long I barely noticed it anymore. Vendor accounts, credit lines, restaurant, my signature. I rubbed my thumb over the faint indentation left from years of writing receipts in my shop. Jenna used to sit beside me, watching me sign forms, tracing my handwriting with her little finger. "It looks like a bird," she'd say. George told her it was the mark of a woman who built things with her own hands. I wonder what she tells people now, that her mother is old, confused, easy to borrow from. My phone buzzed again. A text from Jenna. "Mom, I'll swing by later. Need those papers. Don't sort anything without me." Without thinking, I pressed delete. The message vanished, but the aftertaste remained. I wasn't angry. Anger flares and dies. What I felt was something far quieter, deeper, like the tightening of a knot inside the chest, a knot formed from too many years of being dismissed, managed, handled. I walked to the window. The street outside was waking up. Dog walkers, delivery trucks, children in bright jackets tugging at their parents' hands, ordinary lives moving with purpose. I envied that simplicity. Mine had become a tangle of someone else's choices. Just then, my neighbor, Mrs. Langley, waved from across the street. She was carrying a basket of fresh rolls, probably for her grandchildren. They visit often. She once asked why Jenna never comes by unless she needs something. I laughed it off then. Now I'm not sure why. I returned the wave, though my heart felt too heavy to smile. When I turned back to the room, something shifted inside me. A decision. Quiet, but unmistakable. If Jenna was willing to use my name for her business, then I had every right to know exactly what she'd built on it. Every invoice, every contract, every dollar traced back to me. I took the folder of remaining documents and placed it neatly on the table. Then I reached for my address book, the old one, the one with numbers written in 3 different pens across 2 decades. My fingers stopped at a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Arthur Hastings, my late sister's ex-husband, a complicated man, but fair, and now a senior officer at the licensing bureau. Once, long ago, I helped him when no one else would. I still remembered the gratitude in his voice. I closed the book gently. I wasn't done being quiet, but I was very, very done being blind. Jenna arrived earlier than I expected. I had barely finished wiping the kitchen counter when I heard her car door slam. Sharp, hurried, the sound of someone who assumes the world will always wait for her. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She walked in calling, "Mom, where are you?" As though she were entering a storage room she owned, not her mother's house. I stepped out of the kitchen. She stood in the hallway wearing a tailored coat, expensive, crisp, far beyond what she claimed she could afford. Her hair was perfectly done, her lipstick immaculate. She looked polished, yet underneath that polish I sensed something restless, almost irritated. "There you are," she said, brushing past me. "Why didn't you answer my messages? I told you I'd come for the documents." "I saw your messages," I replied. She paused. "And?" I didn't feel the need to respond. Her eyebrows lifted, not in alarm, but in confusion, like a teacher whose student spoke out of turn. "Mom, what's going on? You're acting strange." Strange? Yes. To her, a mother with boundaries must look strange. She went straight to the table and reached for my folder. I placed my hand over it before she could touch it. "Leave that." Her hand froze. "Mom, please. I don't have time for your moods. Investors are breathing down my neck. I told them I'd bring the updated paperwork today." "Under my name?" I asked quietly. She blinked, startled, but only for a moment. Then she sighed dramatically. "Oh, Mom, you're misunderstanding everything. I just used your old business info to speed things up. It's no big deal. You know nothing serious can happen. You're retired. I'm running things now." The words slid over me like cold water. No apology, no hesitation, not even shame. Just that calm, managerial tone, the same tone she used when telling me soup would be enough. I looked at her face, so confident, so sure the world folded itself to her will. I remembered that girl who used to hide behind my legs during thunderstorms. When did she stop seeing me as shelter and start seeing me as scaffolding? "Jenna," I said slowly, "you signed documents with my name." "Oh, for heaven's sake," she snapped. "I copied your signature. That's not the same thing." Then, catching my expression, she softened her voice. "Mom, relax. I know what I'm doing." "You do?" I asked. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because you overreact," she said simply. "You always have. I didn't want to worry you with details you wouldn't understand. Business is complicated. You'd only have gotten anxious." I felt an old ache inside me, one not caused by age or illness, but by years of small humiliations accepted out of love. She continued talking, pacing the kitchen as if rehearsing a speech. "Look, everything's under control. The accounts are fine, the restaurant is growing, and soon I'll have the second location. But these investors, ugh, everything has to be formal. That's why I need those papers. Just give them to me, and I'll fix the rest." I watched her move, watched the confidence in her shoulders, the tension at the edges of her smile. She wasn't asking me for help. She was expecting obedience. And for the first time in years, I felt no guilt in disappointing her. "No," I said. She stopped mid-step. "No? What do you mean, no?" "I won't give you anything," I said calmly. "Not documents, not signatures, not access to my identity." She laughed, not cruelly, but incredulously. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. I don't have time for your stubbornness today." "You had time to eat steak and dessert last night," I answered. She froze completely. Her eyes widened, not ashamed, not caught, but calculating. "You were spying on me?" "I was standing outside a restaurant I helped fund," I said. "I didn't realize I needed permission to see my own daughter." "That's different," she stammered. "I was there for business." "With 3 plates and a bottle of white wine?" Her face flushed. She looked away. "I can't believe you followed me." "I didn't follow you," I said. "I saw you." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, struggling for the right tone. Finally, she settled on the one she always used to regain control. Cool, superior, clipped. "Mom, you're making things difficult for no reason. Hand me the documents and let's move on." I lifted the folder and placed it behind me. "No." Something in my voice made her step back slightly. Not fear, just surprise. She had grown too accustomed to my softness. "Fine," she said sharply. "If you won't help me, you'll only hurt yourself. I'm trying to build something for our future." "Our?" I repeated. "What part of my future involves forged signatures and unpaid credit lines?" She exhaled loudly, exasperated. "You're impossible today." "Today," I said. "I learned what you've been doing for months. That makes today different." She stared at me, searching my face for weakness, for the old softness she could push against. I didn't offer it. Finally, she grabbed her purse. "I'll come back when you're thinking clearly." "You may come back," I said, "but the answer won't change." Her heels clicked sharply as she left, a sound that once would have broken me. Now it only echoed through the quiet house, fading like a habit already dying. I didn't intend to call Arthur that same afternoon, but some decisions make themselves the moment you stop lying to your own reflection. My hands dialed his number, almost before I realized I'd retrieved the old address book. The line rang twice, then a familiar voice, older, rougher, but unmistakably his, said, "Hastings." "Arthur," I answered. "It's Martha Ellington." A pause, then warmth rushed into his tone. "Martha? My God, it's been years. Are you all right?" "I will be," I said, "but I need to see you today." He didn't ask for details. "Come by my office. I'll clear my schedule." That was Arthur. Complicated, imperfect, but loyal in the ways that mattered. The last time I'd seen him, his life was in pieces, jobless, drinking, near ruin. I was the one who helped him untangle his mess, shielded him from my sister's fury, and nudged him toward recovery. I never asked for repayment. Now, for the first time, I felt allowed to collect on an old debt, not in money, but in truth. His office was in a modest government building downtown. Neutral walls, stale carpeting, the smell of old paper. Nothing intimidating, just the quiet machinery of local bureaucracy. Arthur stepped out when he saw me, his gray beard neatly trimmed, eyes clearer than I remembered. "You look strong," he said, as though surprised. "I had to be," I replied. He guided me into his office and closed the door. "What's going on, Martha?" "You sounded steady. Too steady." I sat slowly, placing my folder on his desk. "My daughter has been using my old business license, without my knowledge. My signature appears on documents I didn't sign." He frowned deeply. "That's a serious claim." "I know," I said calmly. "That's why I'm here." He opened the folder. I watched his brow tighten as he scanned the pages. "Some sheets are missing," he noted. "Yes," I said. "And I believe she has them." He nodded once, slowly. "Martha, do you want me to look the other way, or do you want me to look closely?" I met his gaze. "Look closely." The simplicity of my answer seemed to settle the air. Arthur leaned back in his chair, studying me with the respect people reserve for those who've survived long enough to know what they're saying. She could face heavy scrutiny. These filings, if someone uses an outdated license to obtain credit lines— "She used my name," I interrupted softly. "She used it because she assumed my age would keep me quiet." Arthur exhaled, long and low. "I owe you a great deal, Martha. You know that. When I was at my worst, you were the only person who believed I wasn't beyond repair." He tapped the documents lightly. "If your daughter falsified state filings, there will be consequences. Real ones." "I'm aware." "Are you seeking revenge?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I'm seeking the truth. Whether it hurts her or not, that's her doing, not mine." He considered this, then nodded. "All right, I'll open a preliminary review. Discreet for now. But once it enters the system formally, it can't be undone." "It shouldn't be undone," I said. "Not anymore." He leaned forward. "Do you feel unsafe? Should I mark this as a protection case?" I almost laughed. "I'm old, Arthur, not frightened. I've lived through grief, debt, raising a child alone, and outlasting every assumption people made about my limits. I'm not unsafe. I'm simply done." "Done," he repeated quietly. "I understand." He filled out a short, internal form. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical. Just a few typed notes and his signature. But watching him do it felt like watching a stone drop into still water. The ripples were coming. I could feel them. When he finished, he closed the folder carefully. "I can't promise outcomes, but I can promise procedure and fairness." "That's all I want," I said. We stood. He hesitated, then touched my arm with surprising gentleness. "Your daughter, does she know the strength you still have?" "She will," I replied. Outside, The late afternoon light felt different on my skin. Cooler, cleaner. I walked slowly to the bus stop, my steps measured, my breath steady. For years I had moved through life like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around conflicts, apologizing for my existence. But now the ground felt level again. I wasn't seeking her downfall. I was reclaiming my place. And if my daughter's empire had been built on borrowed pieces of me, she would soon learn those pieces were no longer hers to take. Arthur kept his word. I could tell even before he phoned me. Bureaucracy may be slow for the world, but inside official systems, a single raised eyebrow can shift entire corridors of air. Early the next morning, as I watered the geraniums on my windowsill, I saw Jenna's car speed past my house. She didn't stop. She didn't even slow down. But the way she gripped the wheel, the tightness in her shoulders, told me something had begun. Around noon, Arthur called. "Martha," he said. A preliminary inspection team was dispatched. Standard procedure. No accusations yet, but your daughter will feel the pressure. I understand. And Martha, don't let her intimidate you. I won't, I said, surprised at how true it felt. After the call, I made myself a proper lunch. Eggs, toast, tomatoes, not soup. I sat at the table and ate slowly, without guilt, without rushing. An ordinary meal, but to me, it tasted like reclaimed territory. Around 2, my neighbor Mrs. Langley knocked on my door, carrying fresh rolls again. We chatted about nothing. Her garden, her grandson's school play, the weather turning warm too early. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to pretend I was fine. I was fine. Something inside me was rearranging itself into a shape I recognized. Later, while sweeping the porch, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Jenna. 1 short text. "Mom, call me now." No tenderness, no greeting, just panic disguised as command. I didn't reply. By evening, I heard more. The servers at the restaurant talking outside while taking a smoke break, their voices drifting through the open street. "Inspectors were there for hours," one said. "Jenna looked like she'd choke someone." Another added, "She kept saying it's a misunderstanding, but they had paperwork with someone else's name on it." Someone else's name. Mine. Finally standing where she put it. I didn't linger. Gossip has never been my taste. I walked home slowly, my joints complaining, but my breath steady. Inside, I brewed tea, opened a book I'd abandoned months ago, and settled into my chair. It was the first evening in a long time when I didn't wait for a phone call, didn't shrink at footsteps on the porch, didn't brace for a request disguised as affection. The house felt right. Quiet, but not empty. A place belonging to me again. Just as I turned a page, the phone rang. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Mom," Jenna said, her voice tight, brittle. "Why didn't you answer earlier? Inspectors came today. They're demanding documents, your documents. They said filings were linked to you. Did you talk to someone?" I listened, letting her words pour out in frantic, uneven rushes. She wasn't angry. Not really. She was frightened. Something she hadn't been in years. "I'm dealing with my own matters," I said simply. "Mom, this could ruin everything. My reputation—" "Your choices brought this," I interrupted softly. She inhaled sharply. "So you did something." "I protected what belongs to me," I said. "Nothing more." Silence stretched, thin and trembling. "Mom, please just tell me what you did." "I told the truth," I said. For once, that was enough. Before she could answer, I said goodnight and ended the call. The house settled around me again, warm in the quiet. For the first time in decades, my daughter was dealing with consequences, and I wasn't the one cushioning her fall. Jenna didn't wait long before trying again. By late morning the next day, she was standing on my porch, ringing the bell with the impatience of someone who believes persistence is the same thing as authority. I opened the door, though not fully. The metal chain stayed in place. "Mom," she said, breathless, "we need to talk. Please." Her please wasn't soft. It was sharp, strained, the plea of someone accustomed to winning by exhaustion rather than honesty. I unlatched the chain and stepped aside. She entered quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. Her eyes were swollen from lack of sleep, her lipstick smudged, her posture pulled tight like a thread ready to snap. She looked less polished than usual, and for the first time in a long time, I recognized something familiar in her face. Fear wrapped in pride. She sat at the table without waiting to be invited. "Mom, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. The inspectors say there are inconsistencies. They want proof of authorization. They're demanding original filings. They're threatening fines, maybe suspension. I can't afford any of that." I poured myself tea. I didn't pour any for her. She noticed. She took a shaky breath. "I know I should have told you. I know I crossed some lines, but I did it for us, for the future. I was trying to build something better." "For whom?" I asked quietly. "For—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "For the family." I stirred my tea slowly. "You haven't acted like part of a family for a long time." Her eyes flashed with something like wounded pride. "That's not fair. I work hard. Everything I have, I built—" "With whose name?" I interrupted. She looked away. There it was. The truth she kept trying to step around like a puddle she didn't want to admit was her own. She clasped her hands tightly. "Mom, I'm begging you. Help me. Just say you approved the filings, that you allowed me to use your license. They'll be easier on me if it looks like a misunderstanding. Just say it was an oversight." I watched her carefully. This wasn't an apology. It was strategy dressed in sentiment. "You want my voice," I said, "because yours is no longer enough." She flinched. "Mom, why are you being so cold?" "Because warmth in the wrong place becomes fuel for someone else's fire." But I didn't say that. Instead, I folded my hands. "You didn't ask permission. You didn't show respect. You didn't think I deserved to know. And now you want me to clean your mess." "It's not a mess," she snapped, then softened again. It's opportunity gone sideways." "Call it what you want," I said. "But you created it." Tears welled in her eyes, beautiful, deliberate tears she'd learned to produce in childhood whenever consequences approached. Once, those tears would have undone me, made me open my purse, my time, my patience. Now they only made me tired. She reached across the table. "Mom, please, I'm your daughter." I pulled my hand back. "And I'm your mother, not your shield." She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. "You'd really let my business fall apart?" "I'm not letting anything happen," I said. "You already decided what would happen the moment you forged my name." The last part hung in the air like dust caught in sunlight, plain, undeniable. She wiped her cheek angrily. "Fine. If you won't help me, then I'll figure something out myself." "I hope you do," I said. And I meant it. She stood abruptly, grabbed her purse, hesitated as if expecting me to call her back, as I always had. But I stayed seated. Her breathing hitched. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't understand you anymore." I looked at her steadily. "You never tried." She left without slamming the door. A quiet exit, much quieter than the life she had built on noise and borrowed pieces of me. And when the sound of her car faded down the street, I felt something inside me loosen. Not relief, not triumph, just space. Finally, mercifully, space to breathe again. The world didn't collapse in one dramatic moment for Jenna. It unraveled in small, precise cuts, the kind bureaucracy delivers with an indifferent hand. By the third day, the restaurant's front windows stayed dark long past opening time. The usual stream of servers arriving for their shifts was gone. Even the music that drifted faintly into the street had fallen silent. I learned this not by looking for it, but because life has a way of placing truth right in front of you once you stop running from it. That morning, while I folded laundry by the living room window, I saw Jenna's car parked crookedly outside the restaurant. She stood by the door with two inspectors. Their posture was formal, clipped. Hers was anything but. Arms crossed tightly, chin quivering, her voice raised just enough to betray panic. I watched her gesture toward stacks of paperwork she'd brought in a large folder, the same color as mine. The conversation ended quickly. One inspector handed her a notice, bright yellow, impossible to ignore. Jenna stared at it for a long moment, shoulders slumping, then pressed her forehead against the locked glass door. It hurt to watch. Not because she was being punished, but because I finally saw her, not as the polished businesswoman she presented to the world, but as that frightened girl who once hid behind me during thunderstorms. Only now she had storms of her own making. By afternoon, she called. Not in the usual clipped tone. Not with demands. Just a small, shaking voice. "Mom, can I come over?" I let the phone rest against my cheek a moment. It had been years since she asked instead of assumed. "Yes," I said, "if you need to talk." When she arrived, she looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in spirit, as though the air around her wasn't holding her up the way it once did. She sat at the table carefully, folding her hands as though they might break if she used them wrong. "Mom," she whispered, "they suspended my license. Temporarily, they say, but everything is on hold. My accounts, my deliveries, even the payroll. They want every filing rechecked, every signature verified." "And were they?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "No." Honesty, not full, but closer than before. For a moment, she seemed ready to reach for me, but then she simply rested her palms flat on the table. "I've made mistakes," she admitted. The words came out brittle, as if scraped from the inside. "I thought I could manage things. I thought I was doing the right thing." "You thought you wouldn't get caught," I corrected gently. She looked down. "Mom, please," she said, her voice breaking on the last word. "I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm drowning." Her vulnerability didn't feel like manipulation this time. It felt like exhaustion, the honest kind that comes when arrogance finally collapses under its own weight. "You have to be accountable," I said quietly. "Not to me, to yourself, to the people you work with, to the truth." Tears slid down her face. Not dramatic ones meant to sway me, but quiet ones born from something deeper than fear. "I don't know how," she whispered. "You learn," I said. "The same way we all do, by facing what you've avoided." She nodded slowly, almost childlike. "Mom," she tried again, You're not going to abandon me, are you?" I took a breath, the kind that steadies the heart before speaking. "No," I said, "but I won't shield you anymore. That part of my life is over." She closed her eyes, and I could almost hear the years of assumed dependence cracking around her. For the first time, my daughter sat across from me, not as someone demanding or directing, but as a woman forced to see the edges of her own choices. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt no guilt in letting the silence settle between us. It wasn't a silence of punishment. It was a silence of truth, finally taking its rightful place. Jenna stayed seated at my table long after her tears had dried. She wasn't rushing anymore, not checking her phone, not rehearsing excuses. She looked like someone who had finally run out of places to hide. The house was quiet, the late afternoon light settling softly across her face, making her look younger, almost like the girl she once was, before ambition hardened her edges. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't know when I became this person." I set my cup down. People don't become someone else in one moment, Jenna. They drift, inch by inch, choice by choice. And no one stops them if everyone around keeps stepping back. "Did you step back?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Too many times." She looked at me, searching for blame, but I didn't offer any. I wasn't here to win. I was here to tell the truth before the years ran out. "I thought I was helping," she murmured. "I thought if I worked hard enough, if I impressed the right people, if I built something big, then maybe you'd be proud of me." I exhaled slowly. "Jenna, I was proud of you long before you opened a restaurant. I was proud of you when you brought home messy drawings from school. When you tried riding a bike without training wheels. When you sat with me in the shop sorting buttons by color. Pride was never the problem. Then what was?" "You stopped seeing me," I said quietly. "Somewhere along the way, you replaced me with an idea of who I should be. Easier, quieter, smaller. Someone you didn't have to consider." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't mean to." "Intentions don't keep anyone warm," I replied. She nodded slowly, absorbing it. There was no defensiveness now, only a tired honesty. I continued, my voice steady. "When you told me soup was enough, it wasn't about food. It was about my place in your life. When you took my documents without asking, it wasn't about paperwork. It was about assuming my identity mattered less than your convenience." She covered her face with her hands. "I was overwhelmed. Investors, deadlines." "Those things didn't force you to lie," I interrupted softly. "Pressure doesn't create character. It reveals it." She swallowed hard, wiping her cheeks. "I didn't want you to see me failing." "You didn't fail," I said. "You hid, and hiding eventually creates its own kind of collapse." For a moment, she just breathed, as if relearning how. "Mom, I'm scared." "I know," I said. "And you should be. Not because of the inspectors. Because you've built a life on a foundation that wasn't yours. And now you have to rebuild. But this time without using pieces of me." Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. I leaned back in my chair. "Jenna, I'm old. I don't have many years left to correct what went wrong between us. But I'm not leaving this world as a shadow in my daughter's story. I deserve to stand in my own." She looked up at me then, with something I hadn't seen in years, not entitlement, not irritation, recognition. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. And for once, it wasn't a tactic. It wasn't a negotiation. It was simply a daughter's voice stripped of defense. I nodded, not triumphantly, but with a quiet, tired acceptance. "Apologies are a beginning, Jenna, not a conclusion." She hesitated. "Can we fix things?" I folded my hands. "Yes, but not quickly. You'll have to do the hard work, not the glamorous kind, the honest kind." She nodded again, slowly, as though each motion weighed something real. We sat in silence a while longer. Not the old silence filled with avoidance, but a gentler one, carrying the fragile beginning of something new. Not forgiveness yet, but the possibility of it. In the days that followed, I watched my daughter's world shrink down to something more honest, not destroyed, just stripped of its shine. The restaurant stayed closed while the inspectors continued their review. The fancy lights were off, the music silenced, the chairs stacked neatly inside like obedient pupils waiting for instruction. Without the bustle and noise, the building looked smaller, almost modest. It was strange how truth could change the size of things. Jenna worked from home, papers spread across her dining table, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She came by twice that week, not to demand anything, but to ask quiet questions. "Mom, do you remember how you organized suppliers?" Or, "How did you manage inventory at your shop?" Practical things, unpolished things, the kinds of tasks she once dismissed as beneath her. And I answered, but only when she asked directly. I didn't offer solutions, didn't guide her hand. Learning only works when the hands belong to the person who needs it. One afternoon, while I was pruning the rosebush by the porch, she stood at the gate watching me. Not entering, just watching, as if unsure whether she was welcome. I didn't wave her in. I wanted her to choose the steps herself. Finally, she opened the latch and came closer. "Mom," she said, "the inspectors gave me a list of violations. They said the filings were incomplete and some invoices have to be redone under my own name." She exhaled shakily. "It's worse than I expected." "It's what it is," I replied. "Not worse, not better, just true." She nodded, absorbing the bluntness with less resistance than before. "I've been working through the nights. I think I can fix it, but it'll take time. And money, and—" She paused. "Accountability." The last word came out quietly, like something she had practiced but wasn't yet fluent in. "You're capable," I said. She looked surprised. "You think so?" "I always did," I answered. "You're only dangerous when you forget you're capable." A faint, tired smile tugged at her lips. She helped me gather the clipped branches without being asked. Not to impress me, not to manipulate, just because the branches were there and she had two working hands. It felt oddly meaningful. In the following days, I saw her less. She wasn't avoiding me. She was simply busy with work that no longer relied on shortcuts. Real work. She met with accountants, rewrote contracts, redid supply agreements under her own license. She even told investors the truth, at least enough of it to rebuild her credibility without leaning on borrowed dignity. One evening, she called, her voice soft. "Mom, I reopened today. Only for a few hours. Just coffee and pastries, nothing big." She hesitated. It felt good. Starting small. "Small isn't failure," I said. "It's foundation." Another pause, lighter this time. "Would you like to come by tomorrow?" Not to help. Just to see. I sat in my armchair, feeling the weight of the moment. For years, she had only wanted me to supply, support, absorb. Now she wanted me to witness. "I'll think about it," I said. And it wasn't a punishment. It was honesty. "Okay," she murmured. "Thank you for listening, Mom." After we hung up, I looked around my house. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. I wasn't a prop in her story anymore. I wasn't a tool to steady her image. I was simply myself again. An old woman with a quiet life, a steady chair, and a garden that still bloomed whether anyone applauded it or not. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt that was enough. Not resignation, not loneliness, just Enough. Evan arrived just as the sky began to dim, carrying a paper bag and wearing that sheepish smile he always had when he pretended something wasn't a surprise. He knocked gently. Unlike his mother, he remembered the courtesy of waiting to be invited into someone's home. When I opened the door, he lifted the bag with a small flourish. "I brought dinner," he said. "Real dinner, not soup." I couldn't help but laugh. Quietly, the way older people laugh when something touches a place deeper than humor. "Come in, sweetheart." He spread everything out on the table. Roasted chicken, a small loaf of bread, green beans seasoned with something fragrant. Nothing extravagant, nothing showy, just honest food. Food meant to be shared, not displayed. "Where did you get all this?" I asked. "I made it," he said with a shy shrug. "Mom's been too stressed to cook. I've been practicing." I touched his cheek lightly. "Your grandfather would have liked you." We sat down to eat, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't measure my bites, didn't worry about whether the food was appropriate for my age, didn't feel guilty for wanting something warm and flavorful. I ate because I wanted to, because my body still knew what it meant to enjoy a meal that wasn't an afterthought. Evan watched me with that gentle attentiveness. Young people rarely give the elderly unless love has taught them how. "Grandma," he began, "Mom said things are complicated right now." I nodded. "Yes, complicated is the right word." "She's trying, you know," he said softly. "I've never seen her work like this before. It's like she finally stopped pretending." I didn't answer right away. I cut a piece of bread, let the warmth settle into my fingers. "People change," I said eventually, "when life stops letting them run from themselves." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm glad she has you, even if she doesn't always act like it." "She has herself," I corrected gently. "For the first time, she's learning to stand on her own feet. That's more important than having me as a crutch." He nodded, absorbing this with the seriousness of someone older than his years. "Do you forgive her?" The question hung in the air between us. The kind of question only someone who loves both sides dares to ask. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a path, and some parts of that path I'm still clearing." He smiled a little. "That's fair." We finished dinner slowly, talking about school, about his scholarship hopes, about the girl he still wouldn't name. I listened, not because I was lonely, but because I genuinely wanted to hear him. There is a difference, and he felt it. When we moved to the living room, he noticed the old photo of George on the mantel. "Do you miss him more on days like these?" he asked. "I miss him," I said, "in ways that don't follow days." Evan nodded, resting his hand briefly on mine. "Mom asked if you might come by the restaurant soon. She said she wants to show you something." "I know," I said, "and I'll go. But when I'm ready." That's what I told her. He stretched, then stood. "I should head home. Mom worries if I'm gone too long." I walked him to the door. "Thank you for dinner." He hugged me gently but firmly, the way you hug someone whose bones matter to you. "Good night, Grandma." When the door closed behind him, the house didn't feel empty. It felt settled, balanced, as if some room inside me, long locked, had quietly reopened. I washed the dishes slowly, savoring the memory of the meal, not the food itself, but the simple dignity of eating something that hadn't been rationed to me like a prescription. That night, as I turned off the lights, I realized something. Every part of my life that had been taken from me, choice, voice, presence, was returning. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, like breath after a long-held pause. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever tomorrow asked of me. I went to Jenna's restaurant a week later, not because she insisted, not because I felt obligated, but because something inside me was finally settled enough to walk through a door that once felt heavy with old expectations. The afternoon sun cast a gentle light over the street, and when I approached, I noticed the small handwritten sign taped to the window. Soft reopening. Patience appreciated. There was humility in those words, the kind that doesn't come from marketing, but from a person learning to stand without borrowed strength. Inside, the place looked different. Not the decor was the same, but the air had changed. It was quieter, more grounded. The forced glamour had drained away, leaving something sincere in its place. Jenna stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair in a simple knot. No expensive dress, no bright lipstick. Just my daughter, stripped of performance. She saw me and froze, as if unsure whether to smile or apologize. Then she came around the counter slowly, like a child approaching a mother she wasn't certain she deserved. "Mom," she said softly, "you came." "Yes." She gestured toward a small table near the window. "Can I sit with you?" "Just for a minute?" We sat. She placed a cup of tea in front of me. Not fancy. Not curated. Just warm. "I want to show you something," she said, pulling out a folder. Not mine, but hers, properly labeled with her own name. "These are the corrected filings. The inspectors approved the first round. I'll be operating under my own license now, completely." I nodded. "Good." She hesitated. "I didn't realize how much of my life I'd built on shortcuts. On you." "I know." She swallowed. "I want to do it right this time, not for investors, for myself. And for you, if you'll let me." Let. The word landed gently, not entitled, not demanding, just hopeful. "Jenna," I said, "you don't need my permission to be a better woman. You only need honesty." She looked down at her hands. "I'm trying." "I can see that." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like soft ground, something that could grow. "I'd like us to have dinner together sometime," she said. "A real dinner, whatever you want. No soup." A quiet smile found its way to my lips. "That would be nice." She reached across the table, slowly, giving me time to refuse. I didn't. Her fingers wrapped around mine with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years, not possessive, not rushed, just present. For the first time, she wasn't leaning on me. She was standing beside me. When I left the restaurant, the air felt cool and bright, like the world had opened a window. I walked home steadily, not quickly. At 78, there is no need for haste. Life reveals itself in the pauses. Inside my quiet kitchen, I put the kettle on and stood watching the steam rise. I thought about the years I had spent shrinking myself, folding my needs into silence, believing that love meant endurance. But love, I've learned, also means stepping forward when someone mistakes your softness for absence. I didn't destroy my daughter's world. I simply stopped disappearing from it. And in that space I reclaimed, there was room for both of us to breathe again. Before I sat down with my tea, I opened the window just a little wider. The evening breeze carried the faintest hint of possibility. If my story reminded you of something in your own life, some quiet truth, some forgotten strength, leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Let your voice be heard. Stories like ours shouldn't stay silent.